Are we live now? This is the
I
last
just,
time I did this, Darin. I did my first ever live Zoom the other day. You've done a
I'm
few,
at,
haven't you?
dude, it's like a conveyor belt of live talks right now.
Yeah, well, then you're the veteran of it. But we did the first one. I had no idea we were live, and then I looked up and I realized there was a bunch of attendees, and I started going, "Oh shoot, I'm sorry." So I don't want to do that. I apologize to the original people who are in this right now, as I've already done that. So I'm just going to get it rolling the same style we did the other day. Darin Olien and I are going to do this together. We're going to sort of hop on and go over some human performance concepts that we've worked on and some of the things that you guys can use in the immediate. Obviously, Darin and I, we've been talking about this stuff for the last year or so. So we've been going through some of our own concepts, but how I want to center today's focus is we'll sort of start with if anyone was on the pod or the webinar last week with us, we'll sort of start with some of the psychological triggers that you could be seeing right now that are keeping you in places of avoidance, and then we can kind of segue that into nutritional habits, some of the things that you're seeing, some of the things that people can sort of simplify and have in the immediate, and you know what you're doing there. And then I figured at the end we sort of we'll tie in physiological triggers, example being breath and vision, to sort of pick up on your internal and external state of the environment you're in, and just try to create some awareness.
Yeah.
So, but for people who are maybe only Mindstrong attendees or those sort of sides, Darin, can you just give a quick breakdown of what you're doing and kind of for the immediate, for what's happening right now, kind of some things that you're seeing or picking up on in your expertise that we can sort of segue or feed people with right now?
Yeah, well, certainly the obvious feature is, instead of the conversation being about obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and maybe a little performance, or should I go all the way in, or what kind of crazy weird ass diet should I be on? Now, obviously, the pillar of health and staying healthy and the basics are more powerful and foundational than any other time. And so, like, it's funny because every call I'm on, every question I get, I literally, whether the coronavirus is here or not, I'll say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is making sure the foundation is solid, and which is why I'm stoked to be on this call, because it literally comes from that.
Yeah.
What are you doing every day? And your attitude gives you choices, and within those choices, is your hydration good, and what kind of eating habits are you in? If there's any time on the planet we have the time and space to develop the healthy habits that we've been blowing off for so long. And that's the exciting side of this, because I mean, if you're weak and compromised almost in any way, you're more susceptible.
For sure.
So it comes down to these very basic but powerful tenets that don't go away, in terms of eating, drinking, positive mental outlook. And now we can bring in this ancient concept of breath and all of this stuff, So, and for me, loading the body up with some of the greatest medicinal plants in the world.
Yeah.
That instead of this beautiful marketing thing, they're literally here, have always been here for eternity of our human existence, and have epidemiological use for 10,000 plus years. There's an uptick in all of that stuff, because intuitively we all know.
Yeah.
100%. And we all know. And now more than ever, we do the basic shit, and we realize how powerful that is. And like, use the example of washing your hands.
Right.
And then we can move into drinking water and eating plants, and expanding your herbal chest and all of that stuff. So what I'm seeing, and my voice is like on the verge of cracking from all the talks I've been doing, but what I'm seeing, Harvey, is finally I'm not in contact with the entire globe. nor am I in contact with the entire, stratosphere of middle America other than my family. But certainly even to my brother who lives a simple life in middle of Minnesota, he's calling me up. I'm on the phone with them about protocols of how to boil and prepare chaga and use camu and how much. And like, it's amazing. So if you can look at the positive side of this, because, not to go off, but
Oh yeah, keep going.
we have our cylinder. We have our cylinder of ourselves. And then if we are not filling that up, then we are victim to the intensity of the situation in many different situations. So I love the Mindstrong tribe and the people that are synergizing the communities of like, listen, we have to go back to these basic strong principles so that we can not only fortify ourselves, but also be there for our friends, for our family. But if you're not doing that, you can find reasons and justification to be way over here and be in fear and be a victim to this situation, and it doesn't have to be so.
Well, you said something profound the other day, and I was listening. It was just a short glimpse as you're sort of walking through the mountains, and you had a little tidbit there of what an amazing time to get creative and sort of using an isolated state to create stuff, right? And I look at it as isolation is creation, and we can't create in fear states, right? So your brain is going to be doing, right now you're seeing a lot of things where you're essentially looking at a nervous system or feeling a nervous system, and it's either in an excitable, adjustable adaptation state, and you're making moves, right? Which was happening before this happened in other capacities of the world. But then you're also in like a freeze state, right? And we can get into that fearful freeze state where our creative senses are going down, our problem solving choices are going down. We're going to make bad choices. You just touched on it. And that's what I think you and I, when we kind of poked at each other a little bit last night to just kind of segue a foundation for today's session with people. And I think I posted that for who's listening to understand we're right now falling to the layer of understanding of the tools that we've always had given to us. We just weren't forced to be aware of them, right? And so now you are falling to the understanding of breath. And if you're not aware of that, you're just you have the tool, it's already in you, right? And it is century old. Nutrition, that's a layer of understanding. Movement, layer of understanding, and then sleep. And all of that right now has been put right in front of you. And you're making choices off of essentially your level of self-awareness, which is, I talked about this the other day, it's entirely subjective, right? So we can't leave this call or these conversations with people, and we can't look at this as Darin or Harvey have an answer. We have to look at it as, what tool can I grab from these guys? What tool can I grab from you? How do I create an understanding of that? Just like you talked about the boiling of water, chaga, or those sort of situations. How do I take breathing and just kind of simplify that into the immediate and find little nuggets of progress? And that's where we're sort of the Mindstrong tribe, like you mentioned. We're trying to kind of gather as many people up as we can right now. And we're saying, hey, look, a lot of peace comes in progress. So if we find ourselves in these fear states and isolation, we're going to stop finding progression, which will only create more unneeded, unwanted problems. And we're seeing a lot of that right now, that I think that's kind of what we want to sort of simplify, attack, give you some substance. But is there anything on piggybacking off of that comes to mind in the nutritional world or just mental health world at all before we I kind of go through a trigger state of fear?
Yeah, well, yeah, like, you talked about getting caught into that loop of the fear, and that may feel like it's a ruminating mental thing, but where your mind goes, your body goes.
100%.
So, that's a really, really powerful thing, and we underestimate the subtle things that we can do to create a fortress of strength and power and defense, that the body is innately trying to do all the time. It's kind of that whole thing of get the hell out of the way, you know. But if you don't have the tools, then it's hard to go, what do I grab? And this is such a beautiful time right now because, you know, this is a gnarly situation. It's like, I would have never have thought that this could possibly happen on a global scale. So again, it's like, how do you want to look at this? If you're constantly looking at the fear cycle, you are going to get inundated with the fear and on top of the fear. And oh my God, that you will align and agree with all of that stuff. So we have to check in, be smart, check in with the information, and spend your time with tribes of people that are striving and building yourself through this situation. And that's where it's like, yeah, I'm grateful to jump on this call. And if I can send out any access to information that people can use, then that's thwarting this obvious stress and fear and unknown that we're experiencing right now. So there's some really good, powerful, practical things that we can do. And and let's let them rip.
Yeah, let's let them rip. I'll sort of start in the sense of some simple things. I want to stay simple in sort of the teachings that I'm using right now, and then I can kind of, like I said, we'll let it rip. But so in the moment, you're seeing a lot of things that trigger both of we've talked both about fear, and so for people who are sort of kind of using this tool right now, the immediate, if you can look at this, I mentioned this the other day, anything that you and I are saying is essentially, it doesn't mean that we're not having to practice this as well. Right. And I always try to make sure that that's very well understood. Like, breathing doesn't mean that I have the perfect answer or the physiology of mine is the same as yours. Same thing with nutritional and those sort of things. But what we need to do is we need to become hyper aware of how we're navigating throughout our days. And so one of the concepts I've been talking to a lot of people about is how your mind is constantly going in past regret, past failure, past guilt, or it's thinking future anxiety, future worry. And so right now, like you said, I've never been forced in a position to really talk in the immediate of something that globally we can all join in on a conversation, which is insane, right? But you're looking at things where if you're living in too large of stretches of past or future, then we're missing the present of making good choices. And that's where we could sort of miss our breath work. We could miss our nutritional intake. We could miss moving, and we could miss sleep. And all of those are going to pay negative result feedback loops of choices day after day after day. And so what I've been suggesting is when you start your day, you have to look at your morning is typically, if we start mindset here before we even get into breathing, if you start your day, you're typically in the past, right? You're coming off of a subconscious brain state of past thinking. Right? This is how people kind of always think if or dreaming of the future in a positive light later in the day, where in the morning they're kind of remembering the past. And so when you think of it, if you're coming out of an anxious fear in the morning, the first thing I've been suggesting is to take note of the pace and the sound of your breath. You know, and when you're getting up in the morning, to start with a quick little movement walk and get some sun exposure on you. And jot down, I've been doing a qualitative 1 to 5 sort of stressor acknowledgement of, is my breathing right now calm and quiet and less seen through the nose, or am I finding myself in an immediate fast-paced breath? And that should kind of trigger you into a 5 to 10 minute morning meditation that you can actually intuitively, I love that word, Gardy used it, I can intuitively program right now. And I can sort of look at that. If I'm fast-paced breathing, well, then let's spend the morning with a low respiratory rate. Let's spend a 5 to 10 minutes before we get any substance with food in us or whatnot. Let's slow the breathing down. If we're in a slow breathing pace, well, then now we can sort of use a morning routine to create art in terms of using mental capacity to start programming out for the day. But what I'm really seeing with people is we need to, first and foremost, pay attention to sound and pace of breath immediately when you wake up. And if the breath seems any sort of out of whack, before we attack a day, conversations with other people, before we attack a day of our work, conversations, we need to have a low nasal breathing cadence type of breath, which is just following it in, pendulum style, same seconds in, same seconds out, to a non-stressful state. And we need to get there before we do anything else. If you feel low, already calm, nasal breathing, those sort of things, now we can look at that in a mental fortitude of objectively putting task lists together, waking people up, getting the day going. But I'm trying to get us to a sense of building that intuitive awareness to sound and pace the first thing that you do, because you could come out of these sleep states in very last night's fear about the economy, or last night's fear of your sleep or decisions you made. So that's been my first objective that I'm seeing a lot of people find a lot of success with. But funneling that in, can you talk about what the breath is doing to your nervous system before you start putting stuff into it, especially right away in the start of your day?
Yeah, man, I fully support that, because, obviously it's easy to wake up in a rumination zone, right? And what if this, and what if that, and what about my finances? What about this, and what about my job, and what is the president doing and not doing, and what's the corona and all. And we do have to realize that we have a choice in there. Mm-hmm. So I really firmly believe that nose breathing straight away will shift you from the sympathetic, frantic, stressful fight or flight situation immediately into the parasympathetic. And that's the beautiful thing about the nose. Not to mention those slow, like you were saying, those slow, deep breaths are just not only shifting you into that calm state, it's also oxygenating your tissue much greater than oxygenating your blood, oxygenating your tissue much better than shallow breathing, because of the nitric oxide release in the nose, and so on and so forth. And let's just hint on that physiological ability to saturate more of your tissues while you're consciously, you think it's just about your mind and slowing down and with this breath, but you're also saturating your body in a higher oxygen state. Now that's been studied for 500 years. Yeah. The amount of oxygen in your tissue relates to your so high oxygen environment. Guess what? No bacteria, virus can survive in a high oxygen rich state. Mm-hmm. So there's several million reasons, not to mention just to control the mind. So I firmly agree and support that. One thing that I do, just, my eyes first wake, nose breathe 100%. And I go into this little mantra, because we really have to self-nurture, because it's just crazy. And I literally go into, I love myself like my life depended on it. So I just go into, I love myself. It gives my mind something distracting. I do that 10 times, 10 breaths, and then I wake up. But like you said, that steer of like what's going on in the world and all of that stuff, you and I, everybody has to fight that thing. The world's not going to crash unless, in the next 5 minutes. So spending that time and that space that you've just created for yourself to go into that functional, meditative, and restorative place is just so vital, and it's so there for you. And it doesn't have to be, it's great that now, when I first started doing breathing, it was like in a Kundalini yoga class in early 2000s. And now we know so much more about all of the beautiful effects. And now we're in a performance conversation about how powerful breath is. So extremely important.
Yeah, you nailed, so if you're looking at notes of that session of, okay, well, what is Harvey and Darin saying, or what are they talking about? To simplify that, I mean, we break breath into, you could look at it 3 pillars. I don't necessarily look at it any I guess, top priority, but you could look at it as one, like you just mentioned, meditative, right? So you're looking at your morning, if you're trying to give yourself intentions of why would I do breathing, or what is this going to center me into? Well, if we look at one as being meditative for the mind, anytime we slow down breathing, we turn down our emotional reactivity and we turn up our problem solving. Especially now, you're going to have to be highly effective and efficient of being understimulated, because if you want to take time, you can be extremely stimulated, right? So you want to look at that one as a meditative side. 2 is, like you just said, a cellular side, right? If we can get ourselves to a calm nasal breathing, now we're going to start seeing results in the body. We're going to start seeing things where the body's going to respond appropriately. I'm going to feel more energy, that oxygen in the tissue, all of that sort of thing. So you look at 1 as meditative, 2 cellular, and then 3 mechanical, and I mentioned the other night, you see a lot of those vertical type breathing. You see a lot of people who get very stressed up tight, which is a sympathetic. You've already mentioned that, right? If we're breathing up tight, we're going to be sympathetic gear system. So I always say visualize as yourself as you're taking the diaphragm muscle, breathe it down low, and think about those balloons filling up inside your coffee mugs, your rib cage, if you will, and grab that rich oxygen at the bottom of the lungs, and just kind of put that in your mind of breathing low, breathing horizontally, and you can kind of funnel your breathing into a pillar of meditative, cellular, and mechanical. And anytime you've talked about physiology, which we talk heavily in the Mind Strong crew about getting out of the mind and getting into physiology. So it's almost like if I can't track what I'm thinking, or if I love myself mantra isn't working, well, then let's go through, what am I experiencing externally? Are my mechanics off? Am I breathing into the neck? Am I breathing sympathetic? Okay. Am I cellularly? Am I mouth breathing? Am I breathing loud? Am I shallow breath, sighs? Do I have a dry mouth? Those sort of things. And then meditatively, how much chaos, or do I feel very overwhelmed? And now I kind of give my mind a focus of attention, and I give it something that's actually in real time control, which, dichotomy of control is either inside your control or outside your control. And that's, you mentioned that too right away in the beginning, of you need to dial in what's inside of your control and what's happening right now. So I know you can expand on that a little bit too, I'm sure, but does that sort of, how's that sort of digest with you and what you practice?
Yeah, it's beautiful. The mechanics, obviously, and we're all victim to gravity, right? So we're all collapsing in, we're rounded in, we're looking at our phones, we're at our computers. That shit's not changing. So we have to consciously step in and readjust and reorient our physiology and up with our sternum. And if we're collapsed down on our massive, very powerful diaphragm
100%.
That's behind breathing, right? So just think about that. I love what you said, because just think about the physiological position. You're going to put stress. The last thing we need is more stress on the system.
Right.
But if your body's perceiving it as stress, but you're trying to do something advantageous for the diaphragm, but you're in a bad position, then you're causing an inefficiency in that situation. So yeah, the understanding of body position, and then not to mention, and many people don't realize this, that strong diaphragm and that ability to fill up on the bottom of your lungs and all of that stuff, that's your core stability.
Right.
So you can talk about back problems, and all of this stuff can come by way of just the inability for your body to work those peristaltic muscles very deep down below. So there's a lot going on there. But yeah, I mean, using a checklist physiologically of just as you're breathing, I mean, listen, visualization is a beautiful thing to take your mind consciously, to take it out of rumination and take it through the journey of the air. So a very, very easy thing to do is, as you're breathing in, feel it,
Yeah.
see it, go deep down, have it come out, and then scrubbing the CO2 and releasing it. I mean, just use that as a visual. Super easy. I guarantee everyone, if you spend 5 breaths, 2 breaths in a very deep state, realize the shift of your consciousness just in that tiny bit. And we're always trying to biohack our way to
Right.
feel better,
Right.
when we have these basic tenets, which is why I love this stuff, because there's no way to hack your way around skipping over eating well, sleeping well, breathing well, and moving well, period. So we constantly, as human students, we always have to go back to those basic things.
Tremendously. And again, you touched on that the other day. You had one of your days where you're on fire, and I was sitting in Minnesota going, that's my guy, that a boy there, that boy, because I love the simplicity, right? And simplicity is discipline, right? So we need to discipline up, focus up, and dial in these. And we've touched on the pillars of it, objectively execute that breath to start. And then as we sort of move through that day, and we shift gears into nutrition, which I'm going to humbly hand over to you for the majority of this one. Right. So can you dial in, if I'm sitting there and we're talking general, and I go, okay, I get the simplicity of nutrition. How do I do that? And I ask it from how do I do that, and keep it extremely general and broad, because I imagine that's like a very surface level question, and we can go into the depths, and we will, but let's start surface level so we can create a picture for people who might be sitting there going, what does all that mean to simplify nutrition?
Yeah. What does that all mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah.
Oh, you still there?
Yeah, got me.
Yeah. So I'm losing battery. Hold on.
Go for it.
Thank you. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, I got the breathe cup, by the way, the Wim Hof style. Brian Peters.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I got the love cup.
There you go, man. Hey, there you go. I love it. Right? Yeah. No pun intended. Well, I think that I think that the reason why I want to ask it from a surface side is because we always, like I've said, we follow the layer of understanding. Right. And so in crisis, that's typically, you've had all these tools. Like I've heard everyone, for the most part, and you said in the beginning, we all know, like I've heard nutritional talks, and I've had nutritionists, especially when I played baseball and whatnot. I mean, I've even dove into it. And the thing is, like right now, you're just going to understand the tools that you've possessed. Right. So I think if we look at breathing, and we could talk forever about styles of breathing, hypoxic simulations type stuff, scraping CO2. We could do all of that, but truly it is that simple to look at it in a very practice mechanics. And truthfully, if you practice breathing horizontally, breathing low, like you just talked on, you will unconsciously get better at that. Just like swinging a hockey stick or swinging a golf club, like you will get better. Your motor skills for breathing will get better and stronger. So look at that mechanically always, and then know that the better mechanics, you're getting the back end benefits of cellular health throughout the day. You're getting a meditative, because your brain, I don't want to keep this off of you. I want to get this back to that question. But I mentioned this the other night, your brain is constantly seeking for ways of avoidance, right? And so you're like a scared little system that if things that trigger you in uncertainty, change, attention, or struggle, your system grabs a hold of that, the primal in you, and goes freeze all accounts, because this is scary, right? And if you do, this is how you avoid discomfort. You avoid making good choices. You avoid advancement. And if your breathing is on point, if you're aerobic most of your day, if you're mechanically sound, your brain perceives moments comfortably, and you said nasal breathing. If I'm a good, calm nasal breather, my brain's perceiving this environment as safe. And now like we said, the emotional reactivity goes down, the problem solving goes up. So I love that first pillar. I think that was a good touch on to kind of keep that pillar system of nutrition if I'm looking at my day as a whole and I'm stuck in a house or isolated across the world, what are the very basic executable things that I need to discipline right now and go with?
Yeah, good question. Great question. Appropriate question. Water. Hydration. So, in that instance, there's a few little things that we should unpack there that I'll try to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
But just turning on the tap doesn't mean that water is cellularly receptive.
Okay.
So I'm not going to go too far into that, but there's chemicals, there's fluorides, there's total dissolved solids that you don't want in your body.
Mm-hmm.
There's not the appropriate electrolytes and constituents in there, too many bad things and not enough of the good. So therefore, it summarizes down to this. So a half an ounce per pound of body weight is your target for increasing your hydration. If you're not even close to that, nearly 10% of all Americans don't even drink an ounce of water a day.
Wow.
So I realize that many people, and that's not even accounting that 50% are severely dehydrated. 50% of all the country are severely dehydrated, right?
Yeah.
So how can you function without the basic tenets of this miraculous element that we need in our body that functions, it carries everything, it transmits everything, it actually gives you energy on a cellular level by its exchange within the cell, in and out of the cell, called osmosis. So it's actually proven that it's giving you literally cellular energy. And the number one issue of being dehydrated, the side effect is what? Fatigue, overall fatigue. The problem that people are having is I'm tired even upon waking, and now I reach for the stimulant.
Yep.
I reach for the coffee. I gotta have my coffee. I'm not gonna even approach that conversation right now. Keep drinking your coffee. But what I'm gonna say is, before you drink that coffee, drink at least a quart or to a liter of water. Take your time. If you're not used to drinking the water, drink that first, right? Fill your body with that habit straight away. Mm-hmm. Super important. Also, don't drink it cold. Hard on the digestion. Drink it kind of, room temperature, a little lukewarm. And here's how to prepare it. If you have a super good filter, most filters are junk. Most filters don't allow for the pharmaceutical drugs to get out, the fluorides to get out, and all these potentially neurological compounds that are detrimental. So easy solutions. Amazon sells a countertop distillation unit. So if you want to throw one on your countertop, it distills, evaporates water, recondenses. That's a neutral water. It's about a 7.0 pH. Pretty good. It has low TDS, virtually nothing, which is great. But the important thing is, listen carefully. You need to add the appropriate electrolytes back to the water, or else it will pull and create a gradient in your body and pull that out. Easy to do. Mm-hmm. A sea salt, my favorite, is Himalayan crystal salt. Add a pinch per glass, or a half a teaspoon per gallon. That literally will give you the proper sized electrolytes that your body needs to bring it in and out of the cell. Okay, so that molecular size is called angstrom. If you're throwing in all this other weird electrolytes that companies are producing, those calciums, potassiums are like bowling balls trying to get into a cell this big. It can't get in. So when it's angstrom, when it's in that molecular size, and the Himalayan salt is 250 million years old, it's small enough to get in and out of the cell. Super important. So we're electrical beings. If you don't know that, then you've never had an EEG or any other, even the galvanic response of lie detectors. We're electric. Right. So we need to have the electrolytes in order for the frequency of our body to move, and to especially move on a cellular level. So there's a lot to unpack about water, but that's a simple way. And please, just as a side, very important, try to stay away from plastic right now and forever, because they have what's called bisphenol A, which is a form of synthetic estrogen that makes the plastic malleable. And of course, plastic is mostly petroleum.
Right.
And so someone had the grand idea, the insane idea, that we're going to wrap our food and pour water into petroleum-based, estrogen-filled water that chelates into the water. We just don't need that. It disrupts our hormonal system. So try to use glass, get a distillation or a reverse osmosis machine. These things are pretty cheap, easy to do, or there's some advanced filters out there. I'm not saying that there's not, but there's some advanced filters out there. So so that's number one: hydration. Everything will improve upon hydration. Cognitive abilities, everything else. You talked about responding. My God, if you're dehydrated, your cognitive abilities, hit the toilet.
Well, you also mentioned depletion of energy. You see a lot of the most of the time reaching for a stimulant is seen as unconscious, because it's like you're unknowingly of energy. And so every choice you make, you're depleting energy systems, which is feedback loops to your awareness, right? So you talk about the cognition of all of us as humans. If we're depleting energy, if we're not dialing in the basics, which I'm assuming is going to be a common theme from Darin and I, if you're not dialing that in, you have to look at your body as a car gas gauge. Mentally, emotionally, physically, every choices that you're making, it's depleting energy. And if you're not depleting that in an adaptive way, well, then you're just putting stress on stress. And that is always going to result in pretty much unconscious poor choices, that because it's so easy to reach for stimulants, you're going to reach for stimulants. I talk heavily about the stimulant stuff.
It's a great thing, and I love what you said about it, because stimulants are like living on credit.
Mm-hmm.
How sustainable is it if you have a credit card and it's got a limit to it? You don't know when it's going to hit the limit, but you're borrowing, and you wonder why 5, 10, 20 years down the road, shit's breaking.
Right.
And we've missed out on the cornerstones of what's necessary, and hydration's definitely one of them. There's a cascade of issues that happen upon a dehydrative state. A lot of researchers say at the core of every single chronic disease is the core of dehydration. Mm-hmm. So think about that. Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. And I would go down the list on everything we're talking about here is symptomatic of a degeneration, right? So we want to be living and thriving as best that we can, because, not to get philosophical too much, but very pragmatical in the sense of, if that's a word.
I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. So today, right now, Darin and Harvey are sitting in the future of what was once yesterday. So my choices of yesterday are making me today. Mm-hmm. So what if I ate a big ass pizza, drank a bunch of beer, and smoked? Mm-hmm. How do you think I'm going to be responding today? Do you think you're going to have the same person showing up today?
Right.
So we underestimate the power of our habits, mm-hmm. the power of the seat that you're creating for your future. Mm-hmm. And so living in that, we've all had that. In college, for God's sakes, you drink and then next day you're trashed.
Yep.
So extrapolate that on these subtle but yet powerful things that we're doing or not doing, and that will set the trajectory. Either habit is health or habit is disease, period. It's going to go one of those ways. So, that's the foundation from what we're talking about. And do not underestimate all of this stuff, and don't get so distracted on all these perfect freaking diets and these perfect biohacks. Listen, I have pillars of performance that are incredible, that just by Harvey reaching out to me got me super excited, because I love working with athletes that have the basics under control, have the discipline. And then when you can add on the layers of all of that other stuff, man, you know how many times, Harvey, you've probably come into this too, going, you see an incredible person who's got all this going for them, and it could be an athlete or not, and they have all this God-given talent, and they're completely like not even really taking care of themselves, so that they actually don't even know their own true potential. And I think that's all of us. And you know, there's a good side to genetics, and there's also a bad side to genetics. If you're not given the whisper of the effect or the non-effect that you're having on yourself, and it takes you a little longer because you have strong dynamic DNA, guess what? You're going to pay. You have to pay that credit card, and you can't steal from that all the time. So this is why it's important. I think we've beat the foundational thing to death, but that's the power in it.
Well, it's worth it too. And you've mentioned this too, when you give the example of that, you know, most of the time, high potential, high athletic, high performing people who aren't obeying the laws of nature, a lot of stuff that we're talking about, you sort of ride on that credit. You know, you're riding on thin ice. It's going to crack. We see this all the time, right? And so you essentially look at you're not amazing. You're not an amazing performer. You're an amazing suppressor. And you're going to suppress according to your DNA or your genes pool for as long as that lasts. And then that's when it becomes, I mean, it's a sad story, as I'm sure you've seen many sad stories too, where it's at some point that thing goes through and all of that suppression is massive depth. So you're exactly right. And I would just dial in of what those habits are, which, you know, most of people think. Another thing that you have me thinking about what you're talking about, people, we look at our actions as if we do have control over those. And for the most part, you are yesterday's choices. And that is, as you get older, that becomes a concretable personality trait, you know? And so that's why in these times, again, it's the best time to get to your basics and literally focus on what you just said about hydration, dial in that breathing, look at your fruits, your vegetables, and a lot of stuff that you talk a lot about on that too, and then dial in some movement, simple movement, and habitually put together sleep patterning that sets you up for that next day success. And you'll start transforming that glacier analogy that you always used to see in school, right? Where most of it was underneath the water, because that is how we operate. For the most part, we're operating out of memory and habits of things that we've already made choices from in the past. And so we have to look at that stuff and we have to create a platform for it. And going back to how I talked about the triggers, that also allows you to navigate through life, making right and wrong choices and going, all right, I'm a little uncertain right now, but I got to make a good choice and I got to move. And these things at a cellular level, if they're in tune, if they're fine tuned, the computer brain in here perceives moments as safe or advancing, if you will. So oh, you're about to say something?
Yeah, well, yes. And these habits that we get to quote unquote control and implement, those are the small wins that are so powerful, that are the things, especially in this day and age today, what's going on. We can't control a lot of this stuff, but if we can literally wake up and perform these things, then those are the dopamine and serotonin producing things that, you know, hey, you know what? I made my bed.
Yep.
I drank some good water.
Right.
I breathed. I did some journaling. I did some creative visualizing. I did some to-do lists that align with those things.
Yep.
And you know what? I had an incredible smoothie full of superfoods, nutrient-dense food. And you know what? Now it's 10 a.m. and I just kicked ass.
Yeah.
I am now prepared for the day.
Yeah.
And we all know that we don't even know what's going on in the next hour even. So with that, you know, I guess we can talk about foods a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Take us in there.
So again, this is a rabbit hole, obviously, for me. But again, keeping it very, very simple. Now, setting a context for food, it's really food as medicine. It's giving our micronutrients, our macronutrients, our plethora of antioxidants, polyphenols, anthocyanins, all the defenders that are synergistic with our body. So that's a very quick alignment as to dominate your food consumption with whole foods, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a plant-based guy, so I find plants that give me everything I need. So I dominate my day with tons of superfoods, tons of salad, tons of nutrient-dense food. And that also is, so there's a lot of recipes out there. So something to where like, and listen, we can get into, you know, expanding food windows, intermittent fasting, all of that stuff for most people is a really good idea.
Right.
Can curb some of that insulin sensitivity. Again, this is just general information. We're not your doctor. Right. We're not doctors. This is just information for you to try on in your own way through your own set of awarenesses and whatnot. So, and it's also not talking into any specific disorder. So you have a specific disorder, contact your badass functional medicine doctor who knows something about nutrition, please, not just a normal doctor. So, you know, just, it's probably easy to take you through a day.
Sure.
Kind of, and somewhat is like today, after moving, after breathing, I loaded up after about 15 hours of being done eating around 5 p.m., having a smoothie in my time about 9:30, 10, good window of intermittent fasting. I slam it with superfoods. Now, something, of course, some of the things that I've formulated, I'm putting in there, the Shakeology, all of the stuff, Barucha nuts, but I'm also now loading it up with vitamin C, high-producing vitamin C superfoods, for example. So camu, which is an incredible Amazonian superfood, and a bunch of fruits and vegetables, and essential fatty acids getting by way of chia seeds, that kind of thing. So, so it's a nutrient-dense, fully loaded first kind of breakfast.
Intake.
Now, yeah. So for me, then I load. So if you look at the normal metabolic curve, from a Ayurvedic perspective and a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, there's a flow of metabolic heat that your body is kind of got its own metabolic circadian rhythm. It's kind of just like when the sun goes down, we go to sleep. It's a normal metabolic kind of normal curve for all of us. So there's a dominance of digestive force in the early part of the day, and also it peaks at about noon, and then it starts to taper off. And the important thing to get here is I've tried both, because, you know, the big easy, just touching on this intermittent fasting is done eating, and then I don't eat until noon, and then I eat whatever for the rest of the day. I kind of do it opposite. I kind of end earlier, and then I load myself up full of the superfoods, and then eat a big lunch. And then I'm really not eating much. When I said I was eating done at 4 or 5, I'm really not eating much because I've gotten the majority of my calories. That seems, so that seems to be a very intuitive flow of the rhythm of the metabolism that really works for me upon that studying and trying those things out. So I suggest, because most people, this is a perfect time, because most people, they're working all day,
Yep.
they're at their office, they're all that stuff, and they maybe skipped lunch, they really didn't eat much at all in the morning. So now when they get home, they're totally starving.
Right.
So now, if you think about that bell curve, as the metabolism's going down about 2 p.m., and you get home at 6 or 7, you eat your big ass dinner at 8, 9. So now you've loaded your calories up and put your body in a position where it doesn't have a lot of preparatory digestive enzymes, digestive fire to deal with that amount of calories, not to mention very disruptive on your sleeping pattern.
Yeah.
So if you can start to develop habits to increase that nutrient density when that digestive fire is more powerful, then you'll start to realize, oh, I'm not that ravishing kind of uncontrollable hunger towards the end of the day. And that's something that I really think is again, it's one of those basic pillars. If you understand that flow of digestion, then you're going with it rather than
when are you adding in movement, or when are you putting in movement in between food cycles?
So my movement is before any food.
Yep.
So aside from maybe having like a superfood tonic, not really a superfood tonic, an adaptogenic, no calorie tonic of some kind, I then go right into movement.
Yeah.
And that's usually, 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And now I'm done with that. And now I'm slamming that. I've already prepared it.
Yep.
Prepared the shake. I'm slamming, I'm slamming that at about 9:30, 10. And then a couple hours, I'm having your big Mac Daddy of a salad or soup or something that feels good, and kind of this winter, big yams, things like that. So I'm getting majority of my calories.
Yeah. Do you shift nervous system through breathing at all before meals? Is it after workouts? I do that a lot after workouts, try to shift the system.
Great question. Absolutely, 100%. It's funny that these things are so ingrained, only upon you asking the question that I can then go, of course. Yeah. So after my workout, right, I love to do a restorative breathing to take this intensity. Yeah. Right. I think we did some in Minnesota when I was there.
Right.
So as you're doing all of this and you're hitting it and you're whatever, to shift right down into parasympathetic and literally consciously start to recover straight away. And of course, as you know, that oxygen pumping, getting that oxygen pump and grabbing onto the lactic acid, that's the number one thing to literally seconds after you've done the high intensity, you're pulling out the lactic acid with the oxygen recovery. So 100%. Super important. And then I actually do a 10 breath gratitude breath before every meal. So it's an easy way for me just to really realize that I'm downshifted before I'm eating. The last thing you want to do is sympathetically eat. Right. Meaning that you're all stressed. Your digestive system is going to be completely whacked, and you'll get
does that sympathetic if you're eating late at night too, because you're exhausting energy. So at night, if I'm crushing that big meal, I'm putting my body into a position of having to feel energy on that digestive tract, correct?
Yeah. So now you've cheated your hormonal system too. Yeah. So your body's wanting to shift the pineal and the pituitary wants to shift the pineal into dripping the melatonin. But now you've thrown in this whole other digestive situation that makes it hard, which is why people who eat and go to bed just don't generally sleep very well at all.
I love it. And then that segues into the next morning, which we started out on that concept. So, well, I love it, man. Is there anything you wanted to touch on outside of that?
I mean, there's a million things, but that might be a good little dive for people. I mean, obviously you can get, again, I'm a whole plant-based guy. So there's a million recipes out there. the cool thing, just touching on this for a second, it's a big concept, but the cool thing about all these whole plants typically are in an alkalizing producing state, high mineral, high phytonutrient state. So it really gives your body the essential minerals and alkalizing situation in order for your body to uptake, deal with acids, right? Recover faster, shove off the lactic acid, any other metabolic acids, and also prepare your body to receive more oxygen. So when in an alkaline state, you can receive more oxygen. And when you're in that state and you're breathing on top of it, your body is just being a dynamo as it relates to just being a great defender. And the concept of, and again, I'll end on this, but the concept of, I would just want to touch on the concept of the environment that you're creating. Now, I know that this is an environment where we need to wash our hands, stay away from people, don't put ourselves in those positions. It's like an alcoholic, you don't want to go into a bar, right? So we have a pandemic, we don't want to expose ourselves. At the same time, you want to create your body system as very non-conducive place and home for bacteria or virus. So the more you breathe, the more you clear your body of toxins, the more you bring in alkalizing food, the more oxygen rich you are, the less advantageous system you are to proliferate virus and bacteria. Common sense, right? But if I am eating, doing whatever I want and drinking and all this stuff, you're a compromised person.
For sure.
And that's what we want to use these habits for, so that you can create your environment so that it's stronger and more powerful to defend itself, especially in today's world.
It really is. And for my final remarks on that too, is there's not a better time to find trial and error of how your body responds. I've always sort of looked at it in my own sense of, if those foods make me feel good, those are good foods. If you don't want to take it to the above and beyond of getting the blood tests and you're finding out your sort of things, listen to what you're feeling. If you feel energy, that's probably the path to go down, right? And if you're not feeling that, then we need to make adjustments. But I think that the hammering home of the hydration is basic needs, but tremendous information. You've made that super clear, Darin. That was really awesome to gather, and there were some golden nuggets in there. And then the blueprint of that, I would suggest I'm pretty similar on that blueprint that you just gave of food, so I can't really go with anything outside of that. That's pretty much the style I do. I don't go as deep of a big lunch. I kind of just go even. I like moving around all day, so I typically, anything big for me just shuts me down on the floor. So I'm pretty similar on you on that concept. I obviously love moving without eating at all. That's sort of the big thing, get the mind flowing, and all those sort of things. From our side of it, of looking at your starting your day, I would just be hyper aware of where your mind is going, because it's a mind that is always going off of those memories that we talked about, going off choices from yesterday, a week before, 10 years, whatever. There's all these sort of triggers that are taking place. And when triggers take place, if you have the opportunity to fall to some of these tools that Darin and I are talking about, now you're going to have a higher level of awareness, which is a funneling system to choice making. And if we make better choices, this entire conversation has been about the feedback loops of energy. And if we're in an optimized state energetically, we are going to be fueled up, and we'll get through this. And this will pass, obviously, just like everything else in the history of man. We got to keep pushing each other and helping each other, and we got to get creative and discipline the action. So I think it was some great nuggets, I would say, in terms of what you just passed down on the hydration and nutritional side.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's super important for us to really get this, and like you said, that watching of the mind.
Yeah.
And
and understanding. It's really like this. I've been thinking of this concept lately of the science of you,
Mm-hmm.
and really the self-discovery of who you are and what you are, and how you operate. And there's tools, and breathing's the obvious one, where it drives you inside just naturally, and you start to observe who and what you are. And that self-reflection, self-awareness is one of the most powerful tools that I could possibly even hint at.
Yeah.
Because the more you know who and what you are, the more you can receive information and listen to yourself. Like, just like you were saying, how do I feel from this? And tuning in deeply, not here, not someone regurgitated information. You're like, yeah, they're an expert, so therefore they must know, and I just gave my power away. But more of let it sink inside, try some things on, learn some things for yourself, apply those things, and the science of you will start emerging. And that's a really powerful tool of self-investigation that I think is one of the silver linings of this whole thing, because we all have this, aside from our brave doctors and nurses and first responders and sheriffs and police and all of the amazing people still doing this, the majority of us have this divine timeout. And how are we going to use that? And if I were to say one thing, aside from all the things that we said, I said, learn about listening to yourself and get closer to yourself.
I couldn't agree more, man. It is an amazing opportunity to listen to that. And I love questions and peeling at personal questions to yourself before asking outside of it. First of all, ask yourself, why am I thinking that? Why am I feeling that? And then objectify the basics, as we've hammered that home. But then just spending that time, you have to optimize your stillness time right now and make that a practice. Make your stillness a practice. Make sure you're asking yourself those questions, and set yourself up to go out and have a great day.
Totally.
All right, brother. It was good. Good session. We'll keep it rolling, eh?
Sounds good, man.
All right, man. Yeah, I will talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us, guys.